come out.
What do you... No,
Yeah,
do you
come
mind
out.
have... Please
Yeah,
don't...
come out. I want you to come out.
Can you...
Yeah, come out.
Before restraining me...
I'm not going to restrain you. Just come out a minute. All right? Just stand here a minute. Right, what's happened?
She's done herself then.
Right.
She's striking herself 3, 5...
Where is she at the minute?
I had to put her in the bed.
You had to what? Put her on the bed?
Well, yeah. She's... No.
Well, I think we can all agree the video of Owen Pello there just trying to say to the police that he didn't want to step out of the house because his partner's just done herself in and he doesn't want to get arrested is a pretty incriminating piece of tape. Hi guys, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Now, the case of Owen Pello that I'm going to cover today, it would almost be some kind of parody if we were not talking about the immense loss that Lisa-Marie Thornton has caused in this world. This is a woman who is a devoted mother, who is loved deeply, and we are talking about a man who has stolen her life in the most deplorable of ways. But the way that he acts throughout this case, you would genuinely feel like this man lives in a different universe to any of us. To imagine the verbiage that comes out of his mouth is something that he may have actually contemplated saying before he says it, demonstrates an utter lack of connection or regard with what the average human being just sees as sense and logic. Owen Pello defies and denies reality on every single level, and it is really a sight to behold. Also, for those of you who are new to my channel, I release my content here twice weekly, so if you do like this content, please give me a like. If you've not subscribed yet, please do. That makes a massive difference to me. Get your notifications on, because sometimes I drop extra videos on this channel as well. And as ever, a massive shout out to all of you supporting me on YouTube, community, and also Patreon. I can only make this content here because you go and watch all of my full-length videos and podcasts over there. Without you, this just wouldn't happen. So a massive shout out to all of you. Also, before we kick off with today's true crime video, my new merch is out, Vigilante. When the system fails, we prevail. I love this hoodie. I would be wearing it, but I'm heavily pregnant. And the reality is I get too sweaty because it's a very effective hoodie, great quality. So if you want one of those, you can actually go through the link in the description below. Let's kick off with the case of Owen Pello. So this is one that really evidences that tragic age-old story that reminds us that those who are meant to be closest to us can very often pose the biggest threat to who we are and to our lives in general. I mean, how often do we hear this story play out again and again and again? We're meant to trust our inner circle, and yet it's our inner circle that often is responsible for our greatest demise. And for Lisa-Marie Thornton, that is 100% true. So Owen Pello, quite an odd character, I'm going to be honest, guys. If you look him up online, he's an unusual individual. He even comes across when he communicates very unusually. So there is something within him that makes you feel that there's something a little bit off. He was a 43-year-old guy at the time of this crime. He'd also been in a relationship with Lisa-Marie Thornton since 2015. They actually lived together in their house on Barrow Road in Burnham-on-Sea in Somerset. I mean, Somerset's a lovely area of the world in the UK, and it's somewhere you expect peace and tranquility and beauty and nature. You don't think about it as a backdrop for a horrendous murder. Now, Lisa, she was a 36-year-old mother to 4. So she actually had 3 daughters from an earlier relationship, and she and Pello had a son together. So that in itself demonstrates the gravity of loss we'll be talking about, the ripple effects that we'll be talking about, because she is a mother to all 4 of these children, and to lose your parent in the most diabolical and violent of ways is something that is going to have long-term impacts on the rest of your lives. Now, on the 23rd of November 2017 at 7:40 a.m, police end up arriving at Pello's home. Now, the reason for this is because there's been a call that Pello himself made at 7:30 a.m. Now, on that phone call, Pello had basically told the police that Lisa, who obviously is his partner, was dead. He also says, because she's dead, there's no ambulance required. I'm just going to throw it out there, guys. If your partner is dead, first of all, the trauma is going to be enormous. You're going to be beside yourself. Secondly, you're just going to want an ambulance because, hey, you ain't no medic. So you're going to want to make sure that the right people are here to deal with the body, or indeed deal with reviving the body if that is possible. In fact, his words during the call was, "My partner has suicided. She has stabbed herself multiple times in the chest, throat, whatever." I kid you not. So let's run through that again. "My partner has suicided. She has stabbed herself multiple times in the chest, throat, whatever." Now, my father stabbed himself in the throat during one of his psychotic episodes before he managed to successfully kill himself. And let me tell you, even in his delusional state, he said, on reflection, it was a very painful process. The idea that somebody's just going to repeatedly stab themselves multiple times in all different areas just makes no sense whatsoever. Unless, and there is an unless, there is a caveat. So there are certain drugs that will actually encourage that kind of violent behaviour that sees people do the most horrendous things to themselves, such as removing their eyeballs because they think that they're being possessed by a demon, or stabbing themselves repeatedly, and the adrenaline seems to allow them to carry on doing that for a period of time. It does very rarely, as an outlier, happen. I'm going to say that just for balance, but it's very, very unusual. It's certainly not contextual with this victim. He also said, "She's gone. I'm still trying to close her wounds." Why would you? Why would you do that if she's gone? So again, there's this kind of like, it's not my fault, she's done it all herself, but actually I'm such a good person, I'm actually trying to close her wounds. And he also said something that I think makes him breathtakingly evil and guilty. He said, "I'm okay." Why would you be? Why would you be? Pello, why would you be okay if your partner, the mother of your child, has just suicided, as you said it, and she's now covered in wounds, and you're like, "I'm okay"? No one in the history of anyone who's lost somebody they love is okay. But yeah, he says, "I'm okay. I don't need an ambulance. There's people dying out there. Get an ambulance for them." Now, when I say the description of a narcissist is just playing out perfectly in these words, because what narcissists do is they underestimate everyone around them. So everyone around this person would be thinking, this guy has obviously done something unspeakable, because you would not try to come across as some kind of hero closing wounds of a dead person. You certainly wouldn't suggest, by the way, we don't even need an ambulance, you know. So what do you want them to do? Just send the local funeral directors, just put her in a body bag, carry her out, cremate her? Is that what you're going for? You know, I don't want to disturb anybody like paramedics. You know, they're dealing with people who actually have needs, such as nearly being dead or needing, I don't know, some help with their breathing. But here, this person's already dead, so don't you waste your time. You just crack on. I'm just letting you know that she's dead. It makes no sense whatsoever. But to a narcissist it does, because bear in mind, they're superior, they're far greater knowledge-wise than you or I, and they genuinely believe they can pull the wool over the eyes of everyone, even when it screams the opposite. Now, he continued saying, "I'm counting the wounds to her chest and neck. We were watching Blade Runner," because that's obviously very important. I mean, if you're on the phone to the emergency services for any reason whatsoever, specifically telling them exactly what you were watching on television is essential. They can't do their jobs without that. If you ring up the police and you don't have your actual list of what you've been watching, then don't expect them to come out to you, because that is a requirement of every emergency services call. He also said, "Have you ever seen the person you love dead in front of you? Because it's not good." What a garbled load of tosh. But this is the first experience and instance of them hearing from him, and it takes them all of 1 second to realise they're dealing with a perpetrator, not somebody who's a grieving partner. Now, the police arrive quickly because, understandably, there's apparently a dead body, and also this dead body is covered in knife wounds. When Pello answers the door, they notice straight away he's got bloodstains on his face, he's got bloodstains on his clothes, and again, that would be contextual, particularly if you're trying to do CPR or you have been trying to hold this person that you love when they're bleeding, but it can also be indicative of a perpetrator. That's why they've got the blood of the victim all over them. He then said to the police officer, "Lisa has done herself in. She's stabbed herself 3, 5, 9 times, not even specific. I can tell you that I was watching Blade Runner, but if you actually get me to explain how many times my partner has stabbed herself. Well, I'm a little bit murky on those facts. I mean, it just makes no sense whatsoever. Now, the police at this point proceed to ask where she is, because obviously they want to know if there's any opportunity that they can help her. And he then says the weirdest thing. He says, I had to put her in my bed. She is my love. So again, we're very much playing that I'm the hero, I'm the innocent victim in this, I've lost my partner, but everything that he's saying is actually indicative of guilt. Because why would you take this woman who's now dead, apparently after stabbing herself 3, 5, or is it 9 times, and actually take her into another room, into bed, if she'd actually harmed herself elsewhere? It doesn't make sense, it doesn't compute. And also, it's illogical, because you imagine the dead weight of a body, that's going to be a real challenge.
You Owen?
I am Owen. There is... yeah.
Right, step out.
I don't want to...
You have to a minute. Come out.
Would you... No,
Yeah,
do you
come
mind
out.
have... Please
Yeah,
don't...
come out. I want you to come out.
Can you...
Yeah, come out.
Before restraining me...
I'm not going to restrain you, just come out a minute. Alright? Just stand here a minute. Right, what's happened?
She's done herself then.
Right.
She tried killing herself 3, 5...
Where is she at the
9,
minute?
I had to put her in my bed.
You had to what? Put her on the bed?
Yeah. She's no.
Okay, put the phone down. At the moment, I don't know what's happened. Alright, so I'm arresting on suspicion.
Oh, please.
Alright?
What?
Yeah, you go in. Give us a hand. Give us your hand.
I was supposed to be going to...
Don't drop your phone.
I'm not gonna. I was supposed to be going to go and get some baccy because you guys were coming over.
Have you finished with your calls, please?
Apparently now he's like messing me about.
I'm sorry, the police service
I'll recall.
the line. Do you need to go back through to the police?
No, you put the phone down, the police are here.
Alright, thank you very much.
Next to the car.
Oh,
I was caught. You don't have to say anything, but harm in defence, not mentioning questions, something which you may later rely on in court. Introduce to maybe given evidence.
But again, everything is challenging in this case because this guy is nonsensical in every way, shape and form. Now, he also tells the police that the night before, he'd gone out, he'd got 6 bottles of cider and also a bottle of scotch from the local co-op. And this was apparently for both of them because they were going to watch some films together. So it reminds me of people like Sarah Boone who were just like, oh, you know, I just went out and got some alcohol so we could sit down and enjoy ourselves, do some jigsawing and some art and crafts, and then you're going to end up dead in a suitcase. If you haven't listened to me talk about that case, you can look it up online. The Sarah Boone case is a very interesting one. But understandably, it's kind of trying to paint this picture of normalcy. I just went and got some cider and a bottle of scotch so we could chill and watch some films together. Now, at this point, the police officer, PC Ryan Dingham, they know that this guy is banged to rights as far as he's concerned, so they want to arrest him. And you will see on the body cam that he isn't too happy about this, Pello. In fact, Pello's response to this is, oh, please, I was supposed to be going and getting some baccy. Because we all know that after you've just lost the love of your life, that's what you're thinking about. I just need to get myself some baccy from the shop. Again, totally disassociated from the reality of his actions. I also think he's under the influence. There's obviously some alcohol in his system. And again, that would be contextual into not making sense, but also we've got to look at him as a whole, and he never makes sense whatsoever. And he's only self-interested, he's only self-motivated. Now, the way that Pello talks about the situation shows no remorse whatsoever for the loss of his partner, which has happened apparently just moments before. So this is totally left field where the police are concerned. And as he's being arrested, he's constantly asking things like, can we save her? Can we save her life? Even though he knows she's dead, because he literally rang the emergency services and said, don't even worry about the ambulance because it's too late. Now, the police obviously investigate where Lisa is, and indeed, she is found on a mattress. She's in a really cluttered room, and she's not got any dignity either because she's only wearing her knickers. She's got this really heavily blood-stained cardigan, and that cardigan she was wearing, in fact, would later be referred to in court, and they stated this in court. Given the heavy nature of the bloodstains, the cardigan cannot be presented to the jury as it is now a health hazard. So that's how weighted down and clotted it was in poor Lisa's blood. There was also a knife on top of the quilt that was next to Lisa's hip, which the police took away, and she was officially pronounced dead at 8:14 a.m. Now, understandably, like I said, it's just screaming to the police that there is something untoward that's played out, and Pello is immediately arrested. He's remanded in custody until he has his hearing at Bristol Magistrates Court. And it was never going to go any other way, even though Pello, in his delusional mind, believed it would. Now, when it came down to the forensic evidence, it was quite disturbing, actually. So first of all, at the time of her death, Lisa only weighed 45 kilograms. Now, she was a 5'5" female. She's in her 30s. That means she was literally severely underweight. And pathologist Deborah Cook, she was the person who actually carried out the post-mortem on Lisa's body. You know, he said that there was 3, 5 or 9 stab wounds across the body, bearing in mind that we're meant to believe that she somehow violated herself this way to end her life. She found 39 stab wounds across her body. 39. 1 to the inner knee of her left leg. Now just think about that, your inner knee. Why would you be stabbing yourself there, as he's indicated she was doing? Also, she had 1 on the back of her right shoulder. Well, Lisa could never have done that to herself. She also had 1 to her right breast, and the rest were all across her chest and neck. So there is absolutely no way this is self-inflicted. It goes completely against the grain, injury-wise, of self-inflicted wounds. She'd clearly, as well, been far too weak at this point and frail because of her weight to defend herself against anybody. Like, if I had tried to attack her, I would have been able to get that upper hand because she just doesn't have the body weight that I do. Now, a man, a full-grown man, he'd be able to annihilate her on every single level. There's no defence there. You can't defend yourself against somebody way stronger and way bigger than you. Now, forensic evidence also suggested that Lisa had sustained those injuries while she was in a horizontal position. So she wasn't walking around, she was horizontal. Also, when they examined her cardigan that she was wearing, there were 9 cuts found near the right chest area. So all of those were consistent with stab cuts made with the knife. So this has been a ferocious and protracted attack. Now, all of the finds from the forensic evidence made it 100% clear Lisa could not possibly, on any level, have caused those wounds herself. In fact, a lot of the wounds, they said, would have just been impossible to self-inflict. Now, once this starts to become clear, because bear in mind, Pello thinks that he's got away with it by saying, I'm a really nice guy, don't get me an ambulance, and she just did it to herself 3, 5 or 9 times. So now this evidence is becoming clear and he can't substantiate the suggestions that he's made because understandably it's showing that they weren't self-inflicted, which breaks down his story full stop. He starts to panic. Of course he does, because this guy genuinely intended to get away with murder, and so he starts looking for a way out. So he's creating stories that are just so fantastical in nature that I don't know. If there was a law where you could taser somebody for making up BS, well, he'd still be shocked now. That's all I'm saying. But that, of course, goes against human rights, and obviously we can't do that because we care more about perpetrators often than we do victims these days. But it means that all of the stories he's creating just make no sense whatsoever. None of them add up at all. And that, again, just reinforces the fact that he's guilty of the murder of Lisa. He actually told a mental health nurse that he must have stabbed Lisa after she killed herself. Honestly, let us sink in. He's just kind of like plucking possibilities from the stars. You know, yeah, she's just stabbed herself loads of times. And as she'd done it to herself, I just thought, well, I may as well stab her as well. Literally makes no sense whatsoever. He also said that that was just something he was theorizing because he couldn't remember actually doing so, but obviously it would explain why she had all these extra injuries. Now, when that mental health nurse told the jury that this is what he'd said, she also said that Pello had put his hand up into a fist in the air and mimicked stabbing, which just plays into a lack of remorse for his actions. Now, even though he'd said that to the mental health practitioner, in court he actually said that he had no knowledge of doing that and that he hadn't inflicted an injury on her. But then he also acknowledged that he must have, as she had a wound on her back. So it's really not going well for him when it comes down to questions, because he's trying to act innocent, but everything he's saying is just letting himself look more and more guilty. Now, DC Warren, they also read transcripts from 4 police interviews with Pello. That was on November the 23rd and the 24th. And it's during these interviews he's insisting he didn't kill Lisa. He said, I didn't murder my Lisa. She stabbed herself. I wanted to save her life. Oh, you wanted to save a life. That's why you didn't bother calling emergency services. And when you did, you said you didn't need an ambulance because, you know, people who were alive needed them. I mean, just bizarre, isn't it? Pello also said he'd held Lisa, told her he loved her, and looked into her eyes as she stopped breathing. Honestly, this guy has been watching some really bad Channel 5 movies if he thinks that anyone's going to buy into that. He also said, quote, and this is, bear in mind, him literally apparently looking to the eyes of his lover as she dies. He says, it was beautiful and horrible, and it's an image I'm never going to forget, he said. It was beautiful? I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. I think, like, for the average, well-adjusted human being, the idea of looking at your partner as she takes the last breath because she stabbed herself an inordinate amount of times, I'm trying to struggle to put beautiful in that category. I mean, I would imagine deeply traumatic, harrowing, staining your conscience for the rest of your existence. Just going to throw it out there that they're probably more in context with what we would expect, but not for Pello, because Pello is living in some really bad B movie where somehow it's okay to let your partner die after inflicting these horrendous wounds on herself and to find some kind of beauty in her last breath. Said literally no human being ever in the history of human beings until Pello arrived. Now, Pello was absolutely determined to make people believe that Lisa had done this to herself. So this is his story. This is what he's sticking to. And he also tried to claim that he'd been injured as well. The only problem was that he didn't have any evidence of an injury. It's like, I was injured as well. Where? Well, that's a question for all of us because I don't know. You know, at the end of the day, he didn't have any sign of injury. Now, when that story failed because he didn't have an injury, he tries a different way out, and they are ludicrous. So he comes out with stories like he told the police that Lisa had been very angry about a number of things, including apparently delays in seeing her daughters from her previous relationship because she'd had a 2-week cold. So apparently she's really angry because of this cold. She's not seen her kids. She couldn't see her daughters. It was distressing her. So apparently that's the reason why she'd want to stab herself numerous times. I mean, obviously, when you're desperate to see your kids, you think to yourself, well, maybe I'll just stab myself to death so I'll never see them again. Again, completely ridiculous. But this is him trying his best to wheedle out the guilt. And he also said that on top of that anger because of a cold and not seeing her children from a previous relationship, she was also devastated because Pello and Lisa had had a son together who was born in 2016. And he was being taken into care. So that's a motivator for her to feel depressed. That would be. But again, that's not in context with her desperately wanting to see kids, is it? You know, at the end of the day, apparently she's angry because she wants to see her kids, not because she doesn't want to see her kids. So that would be a motivation to be alive and fighting. He also said it was known that Lisa had this history of drug and alcohol abuse, and that was why the son was actually taken away. And then he said that she'd supposedly been threatening to cut her throat, and that this was in reaction to her son being taken away. Now, I will grant anybody a strong reaction if your child is taken away from you, because it's devastating. But arguably, if you're apparently high on drugs and alcohol, as he's trying to suggest, and she's got this long history, well, the chances are you wouldn't really be in a fit state to be looking after your child. I'm not saying it would be a relief, but it's probably not the thing that's going to make you think I want to kill myself. Now, Pello said he'd reported that to the police, and that also his family had been desperate for him to end the relationship with Lisa. He said that his family had told him Lisa was on a countdown to destruction and they didn't want him near the blast area when she went off. Ugh. You know what? There's something so distasteful, isn't there, about liars of this magnitude. We're talking about this innocent woman being murdered in the most brutal way by a man that was meant to protect her. And all he's trying to do is to shift blame, damage her reputation, and make her seem like the guilty party. Could you get any more despicable than that? So Pello tried to play on that whole idea of the drink and drugs and make it seem that he was the victim, that he was dealing with this Jekyll and Hyde type character. He then went on to say that she was emotionally and physically abusive to him. She was literally so underweight, she was dangerously frail, but apparently she was emotionally and physically abusive to him. He also said that she'd previously tried to overdose and he'd actually saved her life. Like, with respect, the only thing that I would give you in this circumstance is, if she's been treated so deplorably, If she's in a scenario where she feels entirely isolated, where she's being starved to death potentially, where this man is being very violent and abusive and emotionally destructive towards her, then potentially in that mindset, you may wish to end your life because you feel trapped in this purgatory of hell. And with respect, at least leaving that purgatory frees you to some degree, even though there will be victims in your wake, such as your children. But like I said, that's if you stretch what he's suggesting, and still he is the perpetrator that creates that environment, which is not conducive to wanting to remain alive. Now, when he talked about the attempted overdoses that he claims Lisa was making, he said there was no pulse, there was no heartbeat. I checked her airway and gave her 2 breaths. I started chest compressions, and on the 4th, she came back and was alive again. So he's now the hero. He's the hero, he's not the perpetrator, he's not the killer, he's the hero. Previously to the attempt that she succeeded on, according to him, he'd actually saved her life. And all the while, by the way, he's sobbing. And he's saying, I kept her alive after 2.5 years of attempts. She just wanted not to be here, and I don't know why. Well, I mean, looking at you every morning, Pello, would probably be enough of a justification to think you want out in some way. Honestly, because this guy, can you imagine being with this man? Can you imagine being with a narcissist of this level? Somebody who destroys you physically, mentally, emotionally, finally on a fatal level as well. This man has the hallmarks of a predator of the highest level and a narcissist of the highest level. Imagine having to live with him every day. Imagine having a child with him and feeling trapped. You cannot even begin to conceive of the horror you would endure on a day-to-day level. And then just listen to how he's degrading her and reputationally slurring her in court. He has no concern for this woman whatsoever. And she had to live knowing that. And in the end, she had to die knowing that. He also went on in court to say that she had these issues from her childhood, so they were to blame, and that this was why she was so damaged. And it did come out in court that they had a very volatile relationship. And that makes sense because he's obviously a very volatile person. And there was a number of police calls that had been made about verbal and physical abuse since their relationship had started in 2015. And it was said that this was only heightened after their son was taken into care, which is contextual, you'd expect that. But even Pello couldn't keep up with his own stories. 1 minute is denying that he had any part in Lisa's death, given multiple reasons to try and prove why she did this to herself. And then he's trying to cover his tracks, saying things like he must have carried out her wishes, as apparently it was alleged that Lisa had told Pello that she wished for them to die together. Now, that makes absolutely no sense, as if he was trying to carry out her alleged wish, he would be dead too. Just gonna clarify that, you know? At the end of the day, if you're suggesting that she wants to die with you and you're going to carry out those wishes and you're going to kill her and then kill yourself, why are you in court even able to have this conversation? Because if you'd carried out her wishes, you'd be with her. But Pello didn't get the memo on obvious, did he? Just thinks that somehow he can pull the wool over the eyes of those listening to this nonsense. Now, it's clear that Pello, what can I say, wasn't a source to be trusted. And in fact, later down the line, he had discussions with a mental health nurse and he told them things like he had dreams of stabbing Lisa in the back. So that substantiates what we all know, that he's a murderous POS. But like I said, this is a guy who genuinely is so narcissistic, he cannot reconcile that people will not believe him. None of Pello's stories added up, and that made him look unbelievably suspicious and culpable in court. And when you have a jury who are looking at you and looking to figure out whether you're innocent or guilty, well, we can all understand how it's going to go. Now, Pello ended up during the hearing telling the jury that this is how things had played out. They'd been in bed together. He'd gone downstairs to use the toilet to roll a cigarette, even though we know from the interview with the police officer that he said that he wanted to go and get some baccy from the shop. So how real that is, we have no idea. He also at this point says that after, leaving bed where everything's fine, popping downstairs, using the loo, rolling himself a cigarette, that all of a sudden there's a commotion upstairs and he can hear Lisa thumping. So he runs to the bedroom and at this point he sees Lisa stabbing herself 8 times. Was it 3? Was it 5? Was it 9? No, apparently, where the jury's concerned, it was 8 times. And then she's stabbing herself again. And he tells the court that at this point, he was unaware of what was happening, even though he's just said he was watching her stab herself 8 times. And he also said that he couldn't actually see anything at first. And he thought it was just a hand in a fist. And then he realised, horrified by it, that it was actually her holding a knife. He said, I just started taking it in and I collapsed at the foot of the bed when I realised what she was doing, as opposed to being a bloke who's probably 3 times the weight, running over, grabbing the knife out of her hands, stemming the bleeding, just throwing out a more obvious route. But not according to him. He just like, oh, woe is me. I'm just going to collapse by the foot of the bed and let her continue. He also said, I then scrambled towards her and moved the knife out of the way so it was out of her reach. This is after he's allowed her to stab herself multiple times. And he said she had a lot of wounds in her chest. She had 2 in her neck. She was bleeding. He said, at this point, I then laid her down in the bed. He said, I love you, while she was conscious, apparently. So they're the last words that she heard. And she was actually making eye contact. She then told him she loved him. And we said it back and forth to each other maybe half a dozen times, because that's what I'd be doing. I've just stabbed myself several times, actually over 30 times it turns out, but I'm just there and my partner's there, and I'm just like, the most important thing to do now as I bleed out is to tell you how much I love you so many times while she's looking in my eyes. Just to say, jury, she loved me, I loved her. She loved me, I loved her. She loved me, I loved her. That's what was going on. The last thoughts, the last images, the last moments of her life were just spent shrouded in love. Love. It was love that killed her. It was not what I actually did to her. Honestly, he's disgusting, isn't he? Pello then said he kissed Lisa and she kissed him back before her breathing stopped. What kind of fantasy world does this monster exist in? He also claimed that he looked into her eyes and he knew she was gone. Now, it transpired that after she had died, because obviously this was a massively loving event I've just described. Bear in mind, that's exactly what he's just told the jury, that this was a loving event, that yes, she's dead, but what a way to go, looking in the eyes of the person who adores you. And after that trauma is played out, you know, does he immediately call emergency services? Does he get in contact with the police? No, he does at some point, but not initially, because he's too busy taking pictures of her dead, lifeless body. He had 37 images and 1 video of Lisa wounded and also dying. They included her face wounds. They had him holding hands with their matching tattoos that they had as wedding bands. And the truth is, the court actually refused to show a lot of those images to the jury. They were too gruesome, they were too disturbing. And we all know that juries have to go through some gruesome and disturbing stuff, but the very fact that they couldn't show a lot of those images demonstrates how grotesque they were. Now, when he was asked, okay, why had you taken those photographs? It doesn't make sense whatsoever. He said, because I loved her. I wanted to remember her. I mean, that's what you do. When I cut my dad down, I was like, I need to get my iPhone out, take a few snaps, you know, for posterity, family tree information, showing the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. This was your granddad. Yes, he might look a little bit strange because he's dead. I mean, it's BS beyond belief, but this is what he's lying about in court. And this is his mindset, that there were an excuse there because he loved her and wanted to remember, even when she was stabbed and bleeding to death and dying. Police also found a towel in Pello's washer dryer, and that towel had Lisa's DNA on it, so he was obviously trying to clean up the scene to some degree. Now, bear in mind, when it came down to the sentencing, Pello had already been held in custody since his initial arrest in November 2017. So his sentencing was actually held on the 29th of May 2018 at Bristol Crown Court. At this point, he was wearing a green dress, pearls, and he had bobbed black hair. I kid you not, this is when he sat in the dock. Yeah, green dress, pearls, bobbed black hair. And he told the jury that he now lives as a man and a woman. We are living in very modern times, aren't we, chaps? He told the jury that from the age of 6, he was attracted to female things, but when at the age of 9, he played at St. Trinian's Girl in a Play, it all made sense to him that he was born in the wrong body. I'm sure that it had nothing to do with the weirdness that went on in the UK, where some pretty abusive men decided that it might be an easier ride for them in prison to dress as a female and to pretend that they were trans to get into the women's wings of prison as opposed to the male wings, because believe me, the male prisons in the UK are not a place you want to go. The female prisons are full of people who owe debts. So you're hardly in line to be with some kind of serial killer on the whole. It does happen. There are female serial killers out there. But the point is, it happens rarely. They are very different human beings to trans human beings who have gender dysphoria. Let's be clear about that. But this is a manipulator. This is a man who thinks he can get away with it, and that's why he's doing it. He said he sometimes lived as a male, which was for his entire natural life before this moment, and he sometimes lived as a female. And apparently Lisa had been okay with that. Lisa didn't know about that because this guy's a massive liar. Now, bear in mind, he'd pled not guilty, but after listening to the mess of his story, the mismatches of the evidence that he brought forward to describe how she died, along with his unbelievably callous and uncaring nature, I also think probably the dress he was wearing didn't work well for him in this particular case. The jury ended up finding Pello guilty in under 2 hours. Of course they did. Now, when it came down to Judge Peter Blair giving him the sentence he would face, he said, Lisa was aged 36 when you killed her, using a lock knife. You had a collection of over 200 knives. There was something of a fascination for you. You and she had known each other for 2.5 years until you brought her life to an untimely end. Your relationship was labelled as volatile and tempestuous. You were aware Lisa had a number of problems with abuse, drugs and drink. I've no doubt that there were aspects of her conduct that could be highly frustrating. She had made some attempts on her life in the past, but I doubt they were anything like what you did to her. In the hours before you killed her, you consumed 6 bottles of cider and a bottle of Scotch whiskey. I can't say what led to a murderous attack. However, this much we do know. You took that lock knife and you took that towards the body over 38 times. It seems like Lisa was facing away from you when you attacked her. It explains why there were no defensive wounds. You subjected her to 39 wounds, most of them stabbed with force, with almost all of your attack directed towards her neck and chest. She would have suffered throughout it, even if it was just for a few short minutes. I don't know what to make of the photos and video you took of her. I have no doubt that you blamed her for the loss of your son, but you will be sent to prison because of this. For life. Pello was sentenced to life in prison, but he'll actually only serve a minimum term of 17 years, minus the 186 days he's already served in remand, which really bothers me. I don't think 17 years is anywhere near the sentence you should be given for such a volatile and brutal attack. Now, following his sentencing, Lisa's 3 daughters, who were absolute victims in this case, have said they are heartbroken and in unbearable pain. Her mother said, "No words can describe the loss of my beautiful daughter, Lisa-Marie. I'm crying most days and just can't believe she's gone. My heart is broken." One of her daughters said, "I won't have my mum to help prepare me for prom. She won't be able to see me at my wedding day. Her grandchildren won't ever know who she is." Another of her daughters said, "I'm missing a part of me that will never return." It's just devastating, isn't it? Because that's what the ripple effect is. These poor kids, they were kids when this happened. And this POS stole her in the most grotesque of fashions and then sullied her reputation with his lies. Now, ironically, Pello had been a street artist prior to his arrest, and he was actually working under the alias of Callous Spore, and he was a known street artist on Burnham-on-Sea. He actually created lots of street art around the home in Somerset, and Councillor Nick Tolley, he actually led this campaign to remove the artwork, and he said it's in bad taste, it's distressing for the family, damn straight it is, get rid of it all. Absolutely. Those girls do not need to see that kind of art done by this monster in their locality. He also said, "I know that the 3 daughters of Lisa Thornton have gone through a bad time in the last 6 weeks." I mean, that's an understatement beyond belief. He also said, "I know that the 3 daughters of Lisa Thornton have gone through a bad time in the last 6 weeks and have lost what every daughter needs, their mother." I mean, that's a bit of an underestimation, I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes I think that these individuals need to think out what they're saying. When they haven't had a bad time in the last 6 weeks, their life's been ruined to some degree. Like they said, they're never going to have a mother with them in the future. It's been stolen. I mean, a bad time is me losing my purse. It's not me losing my mother. He also went on to say, to have the artwork of the man who took their mum from them on public display is a further daily reminder to them. It must be removed so they can hopefully move on with their lives. Now, those pieces have fortunately since been removed, and rightly so. Now, Pello will have 17 years to contemplate his actions, won't he? He's ensured as well that he's never going to get to see his son again. And I don't think it will bother him that much. I know that sounds awful, because I think that if he has the capacity to do what he did to Lisa, he never had the capacity to be a father. It's as simple as that. He's a man who's incapable of taking responsibility for his own deeds, for his own foul actions. So it's very unlikely he's ever going to acknowledge the blame that he deserves. I genuinely think he will serve his entire sentence feeling like he's the victim, feeling like Lisa is some kind of warped perpetrator who just had to exist to destroy his own freedom. The reality is, Lisa didn't get to live the rest of her future and the rest of her life with the children who loved her, and that's devastating. But at least she is the one who put this absolute monster under lock and key. Every time he goes to bed locked up in that prison for the next minimum 17 years, it's her who is the officer in charge. It's her who is the governor of that prison. It's her that will keep his freedom from him. And for somebody as narcissistic as him, that's going to be devastating. I hope she infects every moment of every minute of every day. I hope she infects every nightmare he has. I hope that she has full control over his psyche for the next 17 years at least, and onwards as far as I'm concerned, because let me tell you, these kind of human beings are a danger from head to toe. People like him don't change, and our world is safer with him banged up behind bars than any of us could ever feel if this kind of monster was walking the streets. Let me know your thoughts, guys. As ever, this is a case of victim blaming, trying to make an individual who had her issues, yes, but certainly wasn't responsible for her own death. This is a way of denigrating her reputation, of sullying the memories, and of using her pain as an opportunity to excuse his deeds. I hope he rots in hell. I hope he rots in hell. I genuinely do. And I don't say that lightly. I mean it with every inch of my being. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as ever. Take care, guys. Look after yourselves. Be safe.